Hi everyone, this is Darren from SimNation. Tonight is the night. It is the beginning of the WWPF's season. This is our oldest league in the Premier League here at SimNation for Draft Day Sports College Football. We are running 2024. We won't adopt 2025 until the end of this season. A large part of that has to do with I want the bugs to be worked out. SNCFL has went to 2025. We went there literally as it released, and I will say that there've been bugs. So we're just going to wait this one out and not going to deal with it, especially since we're at the beginning of the season. And generally, I like flipping during the off season or flipping at the actual season flip. GMPFL, which is our GM Pro Football League here at SimNation, I'll put the link in the video, is going to move to 2025 right after the draft. So if you're interested, a really good coaching group over there. It's being dominated by DP right now with the Cowboys. But if you want to try a new league, the main caveat with that league, of course, and the difference between WWPF and GMPFL, you cannot create custom playbooks. You have to use your coach's playbooks. Whereas the WWPF is completely wide open. So with that out of the way, it's been an interesting ride to get here. Of course, we did live stream the draft. Since then, we've done off-season free agency and training camp. Just cover this real quick because I'm going to disagree with a lot of this, by the way. But what the CPU is saying is the NFC North will be won by Detroit. I probably largely will agree with that one. NFC South will be won by Carolina. I largely agree with that one. I don't agree with the second place. It's not going to be Tampa Bay. It'll be Atlanta. Um, the Cowboys will win the NFC East. That one be interesting to see. There's been a little bit of a back and forth. I think that Templar may actually have a good chance because there's some openings in the NFC East between Philadelphia and New York, which should make it a little bit easier for him to get there. Just going back real quick, Detroit is Brian, who's a really great coach. Talked about him in the college video. Carolina is Invisible Witness. Also talked about him in the college video. Carolina is the best team in the NFC right now. Hands down, they go to the playoffs almost every year and make it to the championship game most years. They are the defending NFC title holders, of course, losing to Pittsburgh last year in the final. Um, but definitely they are the team to beat. Uh, NFC West, this one's going to be wide open. Um, San Francisco is Stewart. I don't know that I wholly disagree with that, but I do think that you have to factor in Barry, who's at LA, who's just done a really phenomenal job with that team to date. Um, they made a really long run into the playoffs last year. I think they're prepped to do it again this year based on what I see with our team. And it could really just be one of those things where they slowly become a pretty much a powerhouse, for want of a better word. Um, we'll go through the rest of the conference by conference in a second. AFC North, I disagree. Baltimore's not going to beat Pittsburgh. The only team I think that will beat Pittsburgh this year on the AFC North is Cleveland, and that's bio. Baltimore's not going to do it. Tennessee, this one is going to be interesting because I do think that Tennessee is probably the right pick here. This is Bama. The AFC South has had a lot of issues with just record because they beat the hell out of each other. And also, they don't fare as well against the teams outside of the conference. Houston would probably be another team I'd keep an eye on. Jacksonville and Indy are both CPU teams, so if you're interested, those are two good CPU teams. The AFC East is the only non-human team in the AFC East is Buffalo. I don't agree with Miami winning it. Every year it picks Miami, and every year it's not Miami. This one's going to come down to between New England and the New York Jets. New England is Shark. New York Jets, of course, is DP. It's the same two teams who are always vying for it. AFC West, I do agree with this. I do agree that Oakland's probably going to win the West. Prince is at Denver, plus you have Joe Durman at San Francisco, and I think you have with Kansas City. I think that's felt reality. So this conference is going to be one of the more competitives, along with the NFC South and NFC North. So that out of the way, let's talk about the conferences and look at each team. There's a better way to look at this, you know. So we'll just we'll go with my opinion. So Minnesota's now open. So if you have an interest, Minnesota's a great team to take. They have a really good roster. If they had a human coach, I think I would factor them in more into the race. I do think that there were some issues here that had to do with what happened uh, during the draft and other things, but Green Bay is DWK, Detroit's Brian, Chicago's Cotton. The way I would kind of see this playing out is I think Detroit is going to win the conference. If you look at them, and we'll just look at these three real quick. I don't want this to be a long video, so if I go through this rather quickly, don't get mad at me. Um, but they, of course, have David Allard, who is one of the best wide receivers out there. They have a good quarterback. The question will be um, is McKay going to be the guy? And he kind of was last year, and Brian had a great year with him. They have arguably one of the best running backs cores in the league. And I think that what you're going to see is they are going to be a pretty balanced team. They have a good defense. So I think in the end, when you look at it, what you quickly see is, just go to career stats, is I want to go to defense. I do think that they have the ability to win this division relatively easily. I do think that Chicago can potentially trip them, but so can Green Bay. I just think that there's a big difference between the teams when it comes to these three, and I think Detroit is much better than both Green Bay and Chicago. Although, again, it will be interesting to see. I'm not logged in as the commish, by the way, so I'm not going to show anything that you don't want to see. But as you can see, there are some really good people. I think Centron was the quarterback last year for Chicago, and he had a pretty good season. So it'll be interesting to see if he stays. Of course, they have really good running backs. It's been a hallmark of Chicago for a long time. And I mean, if Cuevas or Willie Cuevas is the best running back, I think, in my personal opinion. So I think, and again, Cotton has good defenses. I think the challenge that Cotton may run into is with his defense is he's lacking some depth. His cornerbacks are not as fast as some of the others, which is why I think Detroit will be a little bit better. But I think Cotton has the ability to get into the playoffs. I think so does DWK at Green Bay. Again, Green Bay has been a solid team throughout the past. I think the biggest thing that's been holding them back is quarterback. They went out and got Pittsburgh's Kim Hawthorne from the previous year, and he gave them a pretty good season. They have a really good running back in Boudreaux, as well as Johnny Watson. So they have two really good backs. But again, if you look at it, is they actually have a secondary that can probably keep up, but they're lacking depth again. And then the linebacking core could be better. But again, I do think that they're like Alberto Christmas is one of the best safeties in the league. So if I had to say it, AFC North is going to be likely Detroit with Chicago and Green Bay vying for a playoff spot. I don't think Minnesota is going to factor in the race. Everything in the South starts with Carolina. Carolina has just been phenomenal under Invisible Witness. Now they do have a interesting story that's developed in that they parted way in the offseason with Zelensky, who was the pretty much all-world quarterback. And now the question is, does Timothy Campbell start or Clay Ferris? And of course, they have great running backs. Their defense is really, really strong. They've got some good depth, as you can see. The linebacking core is really good as well. Ramsey's a guy to keep an eye out, and even though he's aging, he's still really, really good. They have really good safeties. So all in all, Carolina is really poised to repeat again. The only team that may challenge them is Atlanta. This is Kevin. Atlanta's gotten better year over year since Kevin took them. He came over from Baltimore. Kind of a masochist, if you ask me, because he went from being in the same division with Pittsburgh to now moving to the division with Carolina. So arguably keeps moving the divisions with the strongest team in that division, but it kind of suits Kevin's personality. He is a competitor. He's got a good quarterback in Shaw. Garcia is one of the best running backs in the league. He's got a great offensive line. He's got really good wide receivers. Not maybe as fast as you would like to see, but still pretty good. His cornerback core is definitely one that can compete with. He's got good fast linebackers. All in all, this is a team that can beat Invisible in Carolina. I don't think it's quite there just yet. I think what may hold him back is if he has to throw the ball a lot. Um, and I think that's the difference between these two teams. Tampa Bay, New Orleans, these are CPU teams. If you're interested, Tampa Bay is the better of the two. New Orleans has gotten better year over year, but they draft in the top part of the draft almost every single season. I mentioned New York is open. I will just start with them. If you're looking to join this league, excuse me, hate that does that. New York is a team I would look long and hard on, and the reason why is they arguably have one of the best quarterbacks in Marcus Witten. So if you want to build off this, definitely I would look at Witten. They have all the things to be a really good team. It just hasn't come together yet. Part of that is the defense hasn't shined the way it probably should. As you can see, there's some speed problems outside of the safety core. They've got really good safeties. They have decent cornerbacks, but they just don't have any depth. Like anytime you have a 51 linebacker, that's not going to end well. Um, but I would say Cable did a great job in setting them up. So you might want to take a look at them if you want to join this league. Also, I think the NFC East is one of those where you could step in and really go day one. Philadelphia is also a really good team, but it's really going to be between Templar and Udo, which is ironic. These are two German coaches. So I think Dallas will probably win it this season just because they are better, I think, on paper than Washington is. They got Calvin O'Malley, who is a really good quarterback. He's out of UCLA. I think he'll do wonders for them. The running back could be better, but we'll see how that plays out. And then on offense, you can see they have Eric Gore, who should help them quite a bit. They've got some good corners that are going to compete. And then when you look at Washington, I think Washington will be in the hunt for a playoff spot, but I don't know that they're going to get by Dallas this year. Udo's done a good job in building them back up. But I think what hurts Udo still is quarterback. He doesn't have one. You could argue that Peyton Goodwin is a good quarterback, but I wouldn't. He's not. They do have Church, who is a really good running back. Colborne is another good running back. Um, and then if you look at their defense, the main thing that they're going to have challenge with defense is just speed. Uh, while this league is getting better about it because we've been balancing the league for the last few seasons in the draft, speed still matters, and Dallas has got it. Washington doesn't. I think that's the difference in the two. The wild card here is New York. I think New York, Dallas, Washington will compete. If New York gets a human coach, I think New York is actually the front runner. Seattle, this is probably the best team to take if you want to join the league. It was coached by a really, really good coach in Spoof. I hold Spoof in like ultimately high regard. As you can see, you have Gregory Kuchel, who's just been phenomenal since he came into the league. Two 6,000 seasons, even as a rookie. They've got good running backs. Merriman is one of the better running backs in the league. They have a good line. The wide receiver core is really good because they still have Desmond and Lee. The cornerbacks, not as good as it was, but still pretty good. And then you can see the only thing that probably hurts them is a linebacker core. They have decent linemen. And then free safety wise, those safeties are not as good, but Michael Lewis is really good. I think that's going to be the differential with the CPU having them right now. If a human coach comes in, I think they immediately get in the playoff race and they immediately get in the race for the Western title. But with CPU, if they stay on CPU, I think it's LA and San Francisco. LA is Barry. Barry has just done a phenomenal job with LA. Every year they get stronger. They made a deep run into the playoffs last year. Goldman is just a phenomenal quarterback, and he's done wonders for them. You can see they've got really good running backs. The line is strong. They have decent wide receivers. They're not great, but Trevino and Lund are people to keep an eye on. Cornerback wise, they're going to compete with most teams but the fastest. So they may struggle against teams like Pittsburgh and teams like Oakland, who are speed, speed, speed. Same with Carolina, same with Atlanta. But arguably in that division, they're going to be okay. I and then the other one is Stewart's San Francisco 49ers. They've had a pretty bad run of things the last few seasons. And they haven't been Stewart like. I think that this is going to start turning around. They have Asa Garcia, who is arguably one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. He struggled a little bit with the system, as you can see here. That second year was pretty awful, but last year he did much better. They have arguably the best running back in the league in Nathan Ford from a stats perspective. Only person who's even close to him is Garcia and Lackey, who's at Pittsburgh. Garcia, of course, is at um, Atlanta, sorry. And then the wide receiver core is not great, but it's good. And the cornerback core, again, they're not going to compete against the fastest teams, but they have a really solid linebacker core and they have really good free safeties. So if I had to look at this right now, I think that if we look at the NFC, I think LA wins the division. San Francisco is in on a wild card. I think Dallas wins the East. I think Carolina wins the South. I think Detroit wins the North. And then I think, sorry, the wild card's really going to come down to Green Bay, Chicago, Atlanta. I'm leaning towards Atlanta as being a pretty firm choice. New York, Washington, and San Francisco. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But going into the playoffs, I think the main challenge is I think the NFC title game is probably going to be Detroit versus Carolina. I think LA is the wild card in there. I think that they can get in there. And I think that Carolina will probably be back in the championship game again. But again, it's an early pick. I'm probably going to be wrong because I do hold Detroit very high and I hold LA, and I think San Francisco is the dark horse. Seattle, if they get a human coach, I think definitely is a dark horse, and same with New York. In the AFC, we'll go from the bottom up. Oakland is Oakland. This is Peter. Peter's going to win the division. That's a given, and he's going to compete for the title. Nothing has really changed with Peter. He has arguably the best offense in the league. Adam Johnson is a great quarterback. Probably the only drawback he has is at running back, which isn't really saying much because he's got Gregory Frank. He added him. I think he moved him back from tight end. Um, and then he has a phenomenal line. He's got good tight ends. He picked up Bittner at the offseason, which is insane that he has Bittner, but he also has Sutton. So his wide receiver core, there's only like one or two teams that can even compete against his wide receiver core on defense. And we'll talk about that in a minute. His linebacker core is fast, and he plays that style. He's got great safeties. Oakland is definitely going to be one of the hands-on favorites to win it all this season, not just the division. San Diego, they gave up Bidnor, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If I remember correctly, San Diego's Joe Dorman. Uh, the biggest problem I have with San Diego is they don't have a great quarterback. They picked up Zelensky. I think that immediately made them better. The challenge that they're going to run into, I think, is going to be what is life like look like without Bittner. I mean, they have Mackey, but when you lose Bittner, that's a huge piece. They have a great running back in Dietz, and then of course the key here is can these quarterbacks keep up with uh, Oakland? And as you look at it, they can. So this is one of the two teams I think that can compete with Oakland. So if I think if Joe can get a win or two against Oakland, he's going to be a strong playoff contender. And I do view them as a strong playoff contender. Kansas City, it's kind of hard. I think this is Feld's second season in the league. So still trying to calibrate with him. But he's got Pharaoh Compton, who was the great rookie, not rookie quarterback out of Georgia. Um, and he's a game changer. So just him being on this team changes the whole dynamic of the team. They're going to have to figure out a way to get a rushing game going so that teams can't key on Compton. But the other thing is they're probably a year away from having the right wide receiver structure to be able to compete. Again, they can compete somewhat with Oakland in terms of speed, but I think that's the difference with Kansas City that versus San Diego is they're just going to struggle against Oakland, and they're also going to probably struggle against Denver, which is Prince. By the way, the AFC West has arguably some of the best quarterbacks in the league. Um, and you've already seen that. You have Compton, you have Johnson, you have Zelensky, and you have Bagel. Um, Baker out of Maryland is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And then Prince has always had a good running back core. He does a really good job with his wide receivers. As you can see, they're fast and they're catchy. James Johnson is a really good wide receiver. Um, but I think what has hurt Prince in the past is defense. I think it's going to continue to hurt him. He's going to have a hard time keeping up with Oakland and being able to do that. But one thing about Prince is he puts points on the board and he's really good at it. So it's quite possible you could see two teams come out of Hill for the wild card, although probably not going to happen because generally speaking, either New York or New England also make it in. If we look at the East, I know they picked the Miami Dolphins. I know why the CPU picks that, but the CPU needs to reground itself in reality. If you look at them on paper, I think you have Clarence Cook, who potentially is going to be the quarterback. But Soa has some different options available, though. He doesn't have a great running back. And this is the reason why I don't think Soa is going to win the division, by the way. His wide receiver core is okay. It's not great. And then when you're playing against Shark and you're playing against DP, speed matters. So he does have some speed in his secondary, but his secondary is very, very light. He's got decent linebackers. He's got arguably one of the better safeties in Inman. But I don't think he has the tools to compete against, especially offensively, against either New England or New York. This is Shark. As you can quickly see, Shark is got a pretty good team going. I don't know about Shank. I'm not a big fan of Shank. I think Shark's biggest problem this season is going to be at quarterback. I think he's strong everywhere else. As you can see, he's got a good running backs with LaFleur, who's just been really good since he's come into the league. He's got good tight ends. Uh, Falsey is more of a receiving tight end, as you can see. He's really a wide receiver at the end of the day. But he's got good wideouts, which will help him compete because he can put pressure. Eric Herrera has been one of the best wide receivers in the league since he came in. He has good um, corners that are fast. So he should be able to compete with Oakland and Pittsburgh and New York in that regard. He's got very fast linebackers. He's done a good job drafting. As you can see, his safeties are decent. He's got McQueen. He's really built this team up. And the team each year has gotten better and better. So this could be the year that he makes it to the conference championships, which is, I think, one of the things he really wants to do. I don't think the team's quite there yet to be able to get past Pittsburgh or Oakland, which may stick a little bit in the side, but it's getting better, and I think that he could knock off one of the two, but I don't think he's going to get through both of them. New York, this team is a phenomenal passing attack. They have Daniel Denham, who is the starter. He's had some injury issues. They have Leo McCauley as backup. Terrell Bryan is a really good running back. As you can see, you can tell Will DP falls on the speed thought process. He's got Benny Chong, who's one of the fastest tight ends out there. His wide receivers are just ungodly. Between Kelly and Torres, these are two of the best wide receivers in the league, and they're up there every single season in yardage. But you can see just really great speed. He has no depth, which is going to be an issue. But he's got the corners to be able to compete against the speed at Pittsburgh, Oakland, New England, San Diego, and a couple of the other teams in the NFC. So the Jets will definitely be in the playoff conversation, no doubt. He's got great safeties. If I had to look at this today, I think New England and New York go back and forth. If DP's consistent in uploading, I think New York wins the division this year. Which isn't saying anything bad about New England because I think New England will be probably the most dangerous wild card team if that's the case. But if DP's not consistent with uploading, I think that Shark wins this division. And New York is going to make it into the playoffs no matter what. It's just a common theme. The joke in the AFC is really you have one wild card spot open, which is going to be essentially going to be whoever uh, isn't New York or New England. In the South, pretty wide open still. I think Tennessee is the team to beat in the South. The South has just most years they only have one team that has a winning record, so it's not the South is not a great place. Schaefer is a good quarterback, not great. You see kind of a little bit of a drop off hill, but I do think that Bama's done a good job in rebuilding this roster. And I think that they're year over year getting better. You got Bowman, who's got great hands. You got McCary, who's got great speed. Again, not great depth. It's going to hurt them, but they do have the ability to kind of cover all but the elite teams. So the only team I think that will potentially challenge them, or two teams, and this is a case in this division where the winner is probably the only one getting in, unless Human comes in and takes over either Indianapolis or Jacksonville, would be Tennessee. Not Tennessee, I mean Houston. Sorry, I just did Tennessee. Um, Jacksonville, even on CPU, most years wins this division, or at least competes for the division title. Mostly just because they've had some good quarterback play. I don't think that's going to be the case. McCulloch's getting old. And then you still got Jansen, who is a really good running back. You got Meredith, who's a really good running back. And then, as you can see, is the wide receiver core is not all that great. I think that's what's going to hold them back this year. And outside of Sharp, they don't have a great defense. Now, their safeties are pretty decent, but again, against the elite teams, they're going to struggle. I do think Houston is a wild card hill, and I think JP's still around. I'm not sure, but JP has a pretty solid base, as you can see. Arturo Bates has been one of the better quarterbacks in the league. He's got a backup of Donnell Henderson, who used to play at Pittsburgh, who's also pretty good. Fred Robertson is a pretty good running back. He's got another good one in Vince Wells. Wide receiver wise, he's got speed, so he can compete. Tight end wise, again, some speed. I think the challenge that comes into play here is depth at cornerback and depth at linebacker. Linebacker's not great speed at all, but he's got really good speed on his line, and he's got some really good safeties. So I do think that this is Tennessee's to lose, and Tennessee will likely be the only one coming out, but I think Houston, Jacksonville can challenge. Pittsburgh is the defending champion of the WWPF. They knocked off Carolina last year in a rematch. The Carolina and Pittsburgh have a rivalry going. Pittsburgh, not much has changed with them. They still have Pierce as the starting quarterback. They did bring in Stevens, who backed him up. Pierce has been chronically injured. Lackey took a hit during the offseason on his stats, but still is arguably one of the best running backs in the league. They've got a good line. They've only got stronger in the receiving core. Deal emerged last year as one of the better ones. Kobe Tolliver is someone to keep an eye on. Ellis Wright got hit as well, but the way Pittsburgh uses them, they should be fine. And this is one of the few cornerback cores that probably can keep up with Oakland. Uh, so they have Burke, Cruz, and Lewis. Spite is someone they use a lot, and they have Travis. The linebackers are fast, as you can see. That's just the style that they play. Adam Lyons is someone to keep an eye on. He's a sack artist off the outside. And then the line, they lost Pacheco, the retirement, but they have Perry still, and they picked up Hunnell, who should be decent for them as well. And then they have arguably one of the fastest safety cores out there. Um, so they'll be hard to beat for the division title. But the top two teams to try to take them out this year would be Baltimore. Baltimore CPU. So if you're interested in joining a league, Kevin did a great job in building up Baltimore. So as you can see, excuse me, they don't have a great quarterback, but they have a couple good options with Faison. Running back wise, not a great running back core. This is one of the reasons why I don't think that they're going to really win the division. Um, I would love to see Iceman come back and take them because Iceman was really good, but they still have Alvarez, they still have Cole. They picked up Angle, they have Timothy Greenwood. So the challenge, of course, is at cornerback. They'll pick up one more because I'll add one more to make sure that they've got it. Same with linebacker because they're too light in those areas. They have decent safeties, but I just don't see them being competitive with what they've got. I think defense is going to be an issue for them, and going against Pittsburgh is just going to be hard. The team to watch, though, in this division race is going to be Bio with Cleveland. Bio has a lot of potential on his roster. He has Antonio Newman, who has been really good. He also has Sean Sparks, so he's got two really good quarterbacks that he can put up. He's got Scott Grant at running back. Running is not really something he's going to be strong at. Tight end wise, he's okay. He's got a really good wide receiver in Victor King and Patrick Lindbergh. They have done well for him. Cornerback wise, I think this is the differentiation between them and Pittsburgh. Uh, I think they're going to struggle against Pittsburgh's faster wide receivers and tight ends. But they have a solid linebacker core and they've got a good line, but their safeties are not on the caliber. And I think that's what differentiates Pittsburgh between these other teams. So in the AFC, I think Pittsburgh wins the North. I think South is Tennessee. I think East is, let's just say it's New England. Again, like I caveated, if DP's uploading, I think it's New York. If he's not, I think it's New England. And then I think Oakland wins the West. The two wild card teams I kind of see playing out is New York, and I think it's going to be a toss up between San Diego, Denver, and Cleveland. It's really hard to pick one. I think you'll see the AFC Championship game. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it's going to be New England versus Oakland. And then I think, unfortunately, the title game will be Oakland versus Carolina, which will hopefully give Invisible a chance at redemption because If you look back the last two seasons, or last few seasons, go Hill. As you can see, is last year Pittsburgh kind of beat up on Carolina, and then the previous year Oakland kind of beat up a little bit on Carolina. And the last three seasons, the AFC's kind of taken it. Of course, Seattle got rocked by Oakland, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think that this year Pittsburgh could make it to the playoffs. Not to the playoffs, to the finals, but I just don't think that they're going to get past Oakland. I think New England has a chance because New England kind of springs up on Oakland out of nowhere. And again, the team to watch in the NFC, two teams to watch in the NFC is going to be Atlanta and kind of LA. I think if LA does what they did last year, I think LA has actually the chance of really, um, if we look at last year's, you'll see what I mean, is LA kind of shocked everybody by knocking off Atlanta. That's Kevin. They knocked off Brian, and then they fell to invisible, which is a really hard thing to deal with. And then you saw Pittsburgh knocked off DP, and then they knocked off the Raiders. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I do think that this will be a good season. If you're interested in joining us, I mentioned a couple of the teams, but I'll just reiterate again. Minnesota's open. This is a great team, especially if you like playing in the North. Tampa Bay, New Orleans are both open. Tampa Bay is a solid team in the South. New York, this is a team that you probably want to get a hold of because it has got a lot of great talent on it, starting with Marcus Witten. Philadelphia is another strong team. The East is a competitive division when we have humans in there because there are really good humans in there. Seattle is probably the best team on the market right now. Arizona, if you want to build something up, it's Arizona. Cincinnati's the same way if you want to build Cincinnati. Baltimore is only a few pieces away from competing for the North. Indianapolis, Jacksonville's the better of the two teams, but Indianapolis and Jacksonville are both open. Buffalo's open. This will be a labor of love for you if you want that. It's in a very competitive division, and then there are no openings in the West. So hopefully you like this. The league week one will play in about in what like an hour or actually 2 hours and 15 minutes. So be interesting to see how it goes. If we look at the week one games real quick. Uh, so week one, I like Chicago over Tennessee. I think Chicago is arguably the better of the two teams. Detroit should down Jacksonville. Green Bay should um, actually, this one will be competitive, but I think Green Bay wins it. Atlanta will throttle Cincinnati. Carolina should throttle Baltimore. Cleveland will get by New Orleans. Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay will be close, but Pittsburgh should win it. Kansas City, Dallas, this should be a really good game. I'm going to go Kansas City. Denver versus New York, I'm going to go with Denver, although close. San Diego should get by Philadelphia. Oakland will probably throttle Washington. New England should throttle Arizona. And LA will beat up on the Bills. Miami, San Francisco. San Francisco will get by Miami. New York, Seattle. This should be a close game. It'll be a shootout, but I like New York. And then Minnesota, Indianapolis. Minnesota will throttle Indianapolis. So that's it for now. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Drop me a like. If you're interested in joining, I'll put the league links in the video. But thank you for your time tonight.